I will highlight that we did not increase the swim lessons fee. We felt that swimming is a vital life skill, so we did not raise the swimming lesson fee. I mean, I do think that that is a vital skill, at least to be able to figure out how to float on your back and tread water if something happens. And remember, the base rate for both water and sewer for a residential customer is, $2 that then gets added, which is water and sewer, $1 each. It's still less than a large soda at a drive-through within city limits.
$1 for
water and
each.
sewer, $1 each.
So
It's gonna be $2
when you guys
extra.
pay your water bill, it's going to be $2 more than it is now.
$1 for the sewer end of the water you drink.
Without that, we weren't able to program much needed maintenance projects to remain compliant at our plants. And you all should keep in mind that the funding that we're getting ready to do for the EQ Basin through VRSA will be requiring mandatory rate increases. So the concept of starting some incremental rate increases now versus getting to a point in 2 years where you're doing a $10 increase or something more, depending on whatever we get the credit financing out of what they kind of outline for our covenants, based on how they are going to base what our rate covenant will be moving forward once we complete the EQ Basin project on what our revenue recovery is right now and what we're generating for water and sewer. So part of that is also helping to, one, shore up the operations, two, start implementing some nominal increases as we will be required to do. But the more that we're able to offset in a positive net position, that will also help us with when we do that financing and it's actually finalized as far as what it means for rates. The financing is in place as far as the 0% APR for the 20 years, but it will come with the strings of the rates. Did I explain that right, maybe?
Yes, perfect. I think probably Mayor and Vice Mayor and Councilman Tucker. Mr. Hunter, you may have just been coming on. If you remember 2015, 2016, we had a rate increase and it was like, okay, and that was back on the document that was signed in 2012.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get that, part of how you get 0% interest on that,
But that was better than putting it on every year.
Right. See, what they...
If you go ahead to that every year, you might as well go and get it for more than one time.
Well,
Most enterprise funds they have an inflation rate increase, and essentially this is based on inflation, the cost of materials, and what we're trying to just get done there on a day-to-day basis. Right now, if you don't do that, we're going to have trouble getting our day-to-day stuff done as well. For instance, the county, they arbitrarily do about $1 to a little over $1 annually. There are resource authorities that also have a similar model. Henrico County, other areas of Southwest Virginia, they do program in the cost of inflation because these operations are designed to run based off of the rates to sustain them. And right now the rates don't sustain the cost of the operation. And so when you don't do that right, so if you have to keep taking money from your regular general fund and putting it into your enterprise funds, it will adversely over time impact your credit and bonding rating, which then makes it harder when you go out to borrow money.
We haven't had any problem with the way we did it. Last time we did, I think it was 5 votes, and we didn't have no increase for about 3 years. And that freight rate thing went over.
Yes, but when our municipal advisors came here last month, and it probably got glossed over because there was the pot presentation too, so I know everyone was really excited about the pot presentation, but they outlined that over the last few years, your operations in those areas have exceeded what you've allocated in the budget, meaning we've come back for appropriations, right? So you're pulling from your reserve to offset the cost of doing business in those areas, indicating that your rates aren't where they need to be to just cover the basics. The longer you continue to do that, and I think the last example they gave was it was about 1.8%. The longer you continue to do that, it can impact your credit rating. And then your credit rating is just like your credit score. So when you go, when we go out to say we want to borrow to fix a building or buy vehicles, those kinds of things, we will end up getting a less desirable interest rate. Right now, our credit rating for the size of the locality we are and the budget that we manage is very good. So that's just, that is something that you all need to keep in mind. It's not my final decision, but it's putting it on the radar for you all and thinking ahead also into the future for those things.
Because that was roughly the way that was structured. If you think back, that was almost 10 years ago. When that first started back about 2012. Well, you know, in that period of 10 years, costs have increased significantly, and those plants went from being roughly 60 years old to almost 70 years old.
And back then, the only way we were going to get 0% interest was to put in water meters. We chose not to, and I think we got 1.5% interest rate or something like that.
Well, on your wastewater, you're still at 0 on those, and this one that she just talked about will be at 0 as well.
But we're going to have to
So now that I've spit that nasty word out there, water meters, when will we get to the point that we would we ever get to the point we'd be better off to have water meters?
I think once we start down the I&I plan and you start identifying all the areas where you have in a very methodical way based on our consent order, and you start to really see that we don't have a solid way of determining if it's on the citizens line, if it's on our line with flow meters, probably in the next 5 years, you'll definitely be looking at it. One, from a rate stabilization standpoint, but two, just from an asset standpoint of being able to determine what is city's responsibility or where there's a leak, and also helping to, given the age of your plants, the likelihood that we're ever going to build, 2 brand new plants in the next 10 years, right, is slim to none. But what you can do is when you do have those meters, it helps you on the production and on the NP side, on the cleaning before the river, anticipate the demand.
Yeah, a good point with water meters is Lance's example of the older person that's insurance could go up. They're sitting there, one person using 500 gallons of water a day, a month, and then the person next door's got 10 kids and they're using 10,000 gallons of water, and they're paying the exact same bill. There's nothing fair about that.
No, and I mean, you have most of those folks that they use one plate.
Right.
Minimal dishes. They're not And I will say that if you all ever get to a point where you're interested in exploring a more collaborative effort with your utilities, meters would be required. I do think that you all are the last of 2 localities in the state to not actually have water meters. And it does make it harder, just budgets aside, it makes it harder for your water and wastewater plants to operate because they don't know what they're dealing with from day to day. A perfect example is when we have a water main leak, they don't know what's going on, they don't know where it is, they spend time searching unless someone's calling it in. And so sometimes we had a small leak, it wasn't small, but it was just off of the Rayon Bridge over the Jackson River, right? But we had crews spend 2 hours trying to figure out where it was because all we knew was our production end couldn't keep pace with what was getting pulled. So then we're trying to figure out, everybody riding around in the car with radios, where's it pulling from, right? Then you find it, but it makes it very hard to then also understand exactly, with a much more methodical way, what to anticipate.
And it's a very good question because take one number, for example, in your budget, treatment supplies at your water filtration plant. This year's budget, treatment supplies are plugged in at $100,000. So, say for example, we're losing 20%, and we could capture that and know we didn't have to treat this additional 20% by having a good treatment. Well, that right there is 3/4 of a penny of tax revenue. Or it's $25,000 that can go somewhere else. So.
And there's no way to project when it would be. But
No, and we want to hear you. We want your thoughts.
There are also, as we look out on the horizon, the long-term planning for the city. There are grants through the health department, through the Appalachian Regional Commission, and other state entities that can assist with the initial install of a water meter system. Because we do recognize that, for instance, I know, for a business to have a water meter installed, or if it's a multi-unit dwelling, it's about $700 for the meter.
Yeah.
For the meter, knowing that for a resident that would be cost prohibitive for many residents to get a $700 bill. So, I don't think that we're on that path right now or next year or the following year, but definitely in the next 5 to 7 years, that is something that you all, as a council or whomever may be sitting in your chairs, needs to begin thinking of those things. And that's just a long-term planning piece. When you're one of 2 localities in the state, the reality is the ability to hold out isn't there. And that's just me being honest with you all, because it's the cost of running those operations. Because even if let's just say, decided you didn't want to do the business and you wanted to outsource your water and wastewater, you would not be able to do so right now without meters. Just an example. But like I said, it's not today and it's not tomorrow. It's just something that we know we have to be thinking and figuring out how we get to eventually. And the state may get to a point where they actually require it. They can require it.
Put meters in every house.
It would be several $1 million. We have about...
The resident would put them in.
I wouldn't pay the bill.
No, and that's what I'm saying. There are programs to assist with those
I just
implementations.
wondered, it'd be all right.
I would need on my property, but
We was,
the dog
in 2012, we were doing some upgrade, and we had an option
2011.
We had the option then to go with meters, and it had been a minimal cost with no interest. Then we chose to not do that.
Wasn't that one of the second I phase?
Might be. But that's, we've kicked that can down the road 8 years right
I just wondered how long it'd take if you did it. You put the meters in, how long would it be before you saw any profit or any help?
With the grant programs that are in place, I think within 1 year to 2 years of putting them in, once you get to that point, you would see immediate operational efficiencies with chemical savings and other things, and you would be able to do a rate study after your first year. And a rate study would be looking at every commercial, every residential customer, and looking at what are they using. And you could even do a baseline year. Like, for instance, we're putting water meters in at schools this year because the county's facilities all have water meters. So as we move towards a unified system, have to have meters then. You can't have like some buildings that have a meter and some that don't. So we're using this year as a baseline. So you have that ability, you could have a baseline year, right, where you install the meters and you look at everyone's consumption and then come up with what are your tiered rates. There are localities that actually have certain flat rates or other things for elderly that meet income relief guidelines. So if I'm fixed income and I'm over, 65, my bill may always be this. So there's lots of options for how you do that, and then there's just the rate equalization, and then you're paying for what you truly use.
you might well not put it down in there, because most of them over 65.
But it also helps you when you have those meters with state funding. State funding does look at your ability to be able to fully quantify your consumption and your production and your treatment, right? So they look at those pieces, so it does help as we continue down what will be a long effort of the replacement and renewal and some of the other things that we need to do with inflow and infiltration of our water, our CSO, our combined sewer system. It opens up additional state dollars because you have hard data to say, I know exactly what's coming in and what's going out. And that's all. And it doesn't have to be today, doesn't have to be, that's not even part of this budget. Right. But it is something that you all, for long-range planning, need to be mindful of. And, there's pros, there's cons, but from the funding perspective, there's more things that you're able to get.
Yeah, you're worried.
We call our utility bill water bill. Well, on that utility bill, you got water, sewer, and solid waste. Our water bill is $26.
$25.
25 going to 26. If you just paid your water, you pay $25.
I understand that, but that ain't the way it works. When you get your bill, water, all of it's gonna be in there.
It's a utility bill.
If you put a meter in, your utility bill will go up.
You
Not
can,
just your water.
no, it doesn't have to go up.
No.
Some places, the first 1,000 gallons are free.
There's a flat rate, like a
where
$10,
you don't pay until
$20.
you go over 1,000 gallons. You may stay under 1,000 gallons. You may never have to pay that extra.
You might pay $10 for water then.
Like
Your
water
bill could go down. I mean, there are scenarios where bills go down for some folks, especially when you do your rate study to figure out consumption.
It can get complicated.
Yeah, we would have a professional do a rate study, and there are folks that specialize
You
in
got a big long
They
bill.
also go money to add to the list.
And at the end of the
Well-
day, the utilities and even the general fund, as a government, we aren't designed to make a profit. However, we are designed and charged with providing services as well as utilities. And if that utility costs $20 to manufacture, we need to make sure that we at least have $20 in revenue, as well as a little bit more to pay for maintenance, to pay for inflation, and to pay for future equipment needs. So none of this will be done, to make a profit. We're just trying to keep, as Crystal pointed out earlier, that 1.8% differential in actual revenues and expenditures over the last 8 to 10 years. That's not sustainable. That's not responsible. Because then you get to the point to where your bill does go through the roof and you wonder, how did we get to this point? Because then you haven't spent money on upgrades and maintenance and those types of things. So, yes, we're not about a profit, Raymond, we promise you.
I understand that, but the reason I'm thinking is, if you push your bill so high, you're gonna have people sitting around that's got to decide on whether they can eat or pay bills. And that's what I'm about to eat to the vote.
Right.
I'd rather see somebody eat than pay $5 water or utility bill because they don't know.
And that's the kind of things we've got to think about when we're setting these rates. The tax rate. We do not have a sustainable tax rate. We're going to have to go up on taxes at some point.
You all are
Let's
the
say that out there
same.
with the water bills. Man,
I said, you all are the second lowest in the state.
the state of Virginia has put into place minimum wage increases for the next 3 years that will get to $15 an hour. When we get to $15 an hour, we have many, many people working in the city that don't make $15 an hour. We're going to have to come up with that money. The state's not going to give it to us. We're going to have to come up with it. And the way we get that money is we raise taxes. And that's just what happened.
And if people ain't working, they ain't paid.
Huh?
I said, if people ain't working, you won't be getting it. Then what you gonna do?
Well, we can't not pay them.
The ones that are working go.
If they're working for the city and we've got to pay at least the minimum wage, we're going to have to be able to have that kind of money to pay them, or they're not going to have jobs. We can't keep
That's
them.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If they're not working, then you ain't gonna have money coming in either.
Unfortunately, for a lot of that, most of our departments are slim and sparing on extra manpower to begin with. We in a lot of departments, case in point, I've gotten, for some reason, I guess with the weather being nicer, I've gotten a lot of complaints about cemetery. But when you've got a small staff and a lot of rain and a lot of grass to do, that's why a few years ago, it was 4 or 5, it was right before you came on, we increased the fees for the cemetery. What he just said was to at least try to break even. on cemeteries. At one point, I think the graves, BB, were like $300 and no difference on weekends for overtime, but, we don't have a lot of spare parts and spare parts.
Yeah, we don't have the ability to say, there's nothing going on in cemetery today, come
Yeah.
on out and help Parks and Rec.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of flexibility in the staffing from what we've heard over the past few months of shifting people and, getting rid of people. We are pretty minimum standards right now on just keeping operations going as it is. Unfortunately, at some point, we've kicked the can down the road quite a few years, and at some point, somebody's got to pay for the party.
And what's the sad part of it is when we go to 9.25 this year, is that what it goes to?
950.
950.
It's already
We have
there.
people that don't make 950.
It started May 1st, but doesn't it increase again in midsummer?
No, it increases, I think,
Every year.
every year until you get to
Well,
the 15.
okay.
So for instance, your library already had an increase, perfect example.
And we had to increase,
And we have to.
have to increase their.
The other issue too is, we are going to have a lot of city staff in the next 5 to 7 years. I always like to use 5 to 7 as a good number. Begin to retire. And so our ability to make sure that we are at least as competitive as possible with pay and being above minimum wage once it moves to 15 is going to be vital as well. Especially considering the staffing model we have with such a small staff, you require skilled staff. You can't just have 5 bodies. You need, you have the money for the one body, but that body needs to be, skilled. If that makes sense. I mean, like the folks that we have at our city garage, they are a jack of all trades with what they can work on.
They got CDLs, they got all kinds of extra.
They can do state inspection. I mean,
Don't
they've
have
got.
any CDL operators.
No, but they've got the ability to do state inspections, or they know how to work on a school bus, to a trash truck, to a regular pickup truck, to something that's brand new, to something that's 20 years old. And some of those folks are, not a lick over 22. So they know, but those are the folks that we have to be hiring because of what our operation is. So, once it gets to 15 an hour too, there's going to be a whole nother discussion.
That's right. Because those people who are now making 13 an hour, and someone comes in new at minimum wage making 15, are you going to tell someone making 13 an hour that's been here 12 years that this person we just hired is making more at minimum wage? So we're going to have to adjust those salaries. There's going to be a salary.
They gotta make, the 13's gotta make 15.
Yeah, but if you've been here 20 years.
Yeah, and you only making 15.
And you're making
now-
15, the guy just walks
The guy
out
beside you is making 15.
Yeah, you ain't gonna be happy.
No,
Right.
and you can go to a trucking company and get $18, $20 an hour right off the street with a CDL.
That's right.
They went years and years without, the state gave big boosts.
So we've got some.
That's a two-pronged discussion.
We've got some revenue.
Gosh, we're unpacking a lot of cans of worms.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of stuff we've got to be looking at, and it's hard. They're hard decisions. We don't have a lot of ways to raise money. We've got to increase taxes, and we've got to increase fees if we are expecting the same type of services we have.
Staff is already, stretched thin, but I do feel that would be a huge hit to morale. Just they all show up wanting to do a good job, wanting to get the job done every day. Big success with pothole blitz today. Over 48 potholes filled in one day, the great strip down. What is that? Court Street here.
Court Street.
But they did a great job with it. But they show up every day wanting to give their best, and so knowing if we're going to continue to just try to teeter along and hope the wagon wheels don't fall off, it's going to really also start impacting the morale on a significant level, because folks just won't have the ability to get the job done, and that's what they want to do, is get the job done. I mean, I know that's what I show up to do, is get the job done.
That's why we can't have pretty things for them.
We're obligated to provide certain services, and to provide those services, we need money to provide those services.
They are mandated services, so your water, wastewater, fire, health and safety, so that covers your solid waste, those kinds of things. They're all federally mandated that you have to provide. So let's just say we have someone that decides they want to continually, like, when someone puts the bag of trash out by law, we have to collect it. So when we see trash, it's our job to collect it. And those are mandates, and they're for health, safety, and welfare. And those are things that we're mandated to fund, just like we're mandated to fund social services. There's room for discussion on CSA. Social services is what it is.
Well, then, when you get $15 an hour for salaries, you're also looking
FICA.
at your FICA, that the increased salary is going to be multiplied by 7.65%. Then, depending on where VRS is, that's $15 an hour is going to be multiplied by 12 to 15% for VRS. Then you have what you call health insurance credit. It's going to be multiplied by less than 0.5%. Then your rate for your, you hurt his head?
You're hurting his head.
Okay, your rate for your life insurance also will go up. because
There's
it's
going to be a
based on-
ripple
yeah.
effect throughout the budget.
Yep.
They don't actually make any more than making now, nobody is, it's just you'll have more money.
Their pay will basically be level with what inflation is by the time that the minimum wage gets to that. But unfortunately, the in-between, how we get there and how we afford to do it, that is going to be a doozy.
But it's something we better get on.
Yes, sir.